Farren is another test subject of the Syndicate, and is present in a playable form as a 5-star light dagger unit. He has one of the coolest model designs, with Farren's windbound form showing off not only his dragon claw, but also dragon wings that weren't present in other playable windbound units. The wings give him a lot more presence, which makes his design much more preferable. In terms of gameplay, as a windbound unit, it's totally expected for him to have Dragondrive replacing his normal dragon gauge. He also has a prominent HP requirement for dealing damage, with damage decreasing as his HP decreases, which is basically the opposite of Belina, another fellow windbound subject. Let's take a closer look into his overall kit, and find out how well this prominence of HP will work on Farren. His first skill, Mighty Protector, costs 2600 SP. It deals 2000% damage to frontal enemies, grants a defense amp, and fills the Dragondrive gauge by 10%. The defense amp has a maximum amp level of 2. Typical of Dragondrive units, this skill has a more powerful variant during Dragondrive, called Howling Protector. Howling Protector deals 2600% damage, grants a defense amp, and also fills the Dragondrive gauge by 10%. Its damage will decrease as his HP decreases, down to 10% of its original damage at 1 HP. Already, this skill stands out from other skills that change with Dragondrive. Instead of consuming UTP when used during Dragondrive, it does the exact opposite, providing UTP instead. The only difference of the Dragondrive variant from the normal variant other than damage is the additional HP scaling. As his damage drops to 10% at 1 HP, it would seem that the damage penalty wouldn't be too severe, unless he loses a big chunk of HP. It would be wise to keep his HP high, in order to maintain the most optimal damage output from this skill. Overall, this skill is good, but with its peculiarities a decent at best requirement for optimal damage. His second skill, No Holds Barred, costs 10,725 SP. It's a healing skill that consumes the entire Dragondrive gauge, restoring HP based on the amount of UTP consumed, with 30% potency up to additional 140% of his maximum HP. During Dragondrive, Steadfast Victory is used instead. Steadfast Victory consumes half of the entire gauge, deals 3250% damage, and then fills half of the skill's gauge. Like his first skill, damage decreases as his HP decreases, down to 10% of the original damage. This skill also shares the same peculiarities as his first skill. Both uses the Dragondrive gauge in a similar way, in this case, consuming it, and its Dragondrive variant has the HP to damage scaling. In the normal variant, it heals Farren to a ridiculous degree, potentially filling his HP from 1 point to 4 when the whole gauge is consumed in full. This variant is meant to heal him after a major enemy strike, in situations where healers might not be able to heal him either sufficiently or in time. The Dragondrive variant is a heavy hitter, but consumes half of the Dragondrive gauge, an insanely high cost for a big blow, but not impossible to use, as his first skill grants him a lot of UTP. Overall, this skill is an incredibly potent healer in its normal variant, and a powerful single striker during Dragondrive. Farren has the typical 10% critical rate for dagger units, and a 6% shadow resistance increase when HP is above 80%. Though I frequently shit on this chain co-ability, in Farren's case, this co-ability can further decrease the amount of damage he receives, which is important for Farren to continuously deal optimal damage. Farren is immune to curse, and not poison. This can be a cause of concern for Farren when he gets poisoned, as he'll lose HP over time, gradually reducing his damage output. As for abilities, we'll first go with his exclusive ability, Windbound Shell. Like typical Dragondrive units, Farren's normal attacks and force strikes get empowered, while in Dragondrive, his overall damage during that state also scales with his HP, dealing less damage as his HP decreases. He also gains a 20% defense increase while in this state. This is a slightly more defensive variant of a Dragondrive, having increased defense and deals better damage the higher his HP. The restoration of his UTP from strikes during Dragondrive plus his first skill can essentially allow him to have Dragondrive almost permanently up until he uses his second skill. His second ability, Right Hand Dragon, gradually fills the Dragondrive whenever Farren has a team defense amp. Again, this is an ability that can allow him to have increased uptime on his Dragondrive. It can be made especially good with the fact that there are quite a number of light units that are able to provide defense amps. So, you have chosen to develop Farren into a viable member of your team? There are a few things that need to be kept note of. First, his damage is highly dependent in his HP, so maintaining high HP is crucial in ensuring optimal damage from Farren. Second, he doesn't have his own healing ability, so having reliable healing on himself would be a viable option, which can be achieved by using the refined lighter Jito dagger, specifically on its second skill, which provides increased skill haste and a small yet permanent passive healing. Farren will not really go well with a pure offensive kit. Instead, his kit must be supplemented with defensive abilities. Increased defense when above a certain HP threshold is a great defense ability that he can use. Healing double buff is an excellent ability for him if there's a consistent source of defense boosts in the team. Speaking of defense boosting in the team, let's talk about what units that can go well with Farren. If Farren has healing double buff, a defense booster is necessary, with the only light unit filling that role is Ryzen, a 4-star light lance unit that I have not heard of for a very long time. Ryzen is surprisingly viable, with a decent SP cost for both his defense boosting and damage dealing skills, coupled with a decent set of abilities. Other than a defense booster, a great healer is also necessary for Farren too. Any light healer is fine, with the exception of Galazina, as she is much more offensive in nature. Light healers that can provide additional offense support capabilities are especially preferred. As for his dragon of choice, an offense-based dragon will be a great pairing for him, despite already having little Barbatus as his windbound dragon. The most useful dragon that is also easy to obtain would be Gilgamesh, having decent strength plus additional shadow resistance. The best dragon that balances both strength and defense though would be Raphael, providing HP recovery and increased defense when receiving damage. His other options would be the typical hard-hitting dragons that appear in the recommendation for DPS focused light units. For Farren's Windprint setup, these are what I would use if I were to actually have him. I opt not to use healing double buffs, instead relying on increased defense and shadow resistance to maintain his HP. As I have his Jito dagger, and having an impressive light healer, a defense boosting unit wouldn't be necessary in the team, hence the exclusion of healing double buffs. Farren is the first light Dragondrive unit, and has shown to be quite a powerful unit that a team can have. With his potentially unlimited Dragondrive uptime, he is able to output more consistent damage if he can maintain his HP. Speaking of HP, it is Farren's major weakness. If he isn't able to keep his HP near full most of the time, he'll lose out on a lot of damage potential, as every damage dealt during Dragondrive is dependent on his HP, the lower it becomes as his HP decreases. It reflects his character well. His more defensive form of Dragondrive symbolizes his will to protect, but his HP dependency kind of reflects his immaturity, being relatively young, after all. But overall, Farren will be a great addition if his HP can be properly managed most of the time. Now go out there and assist Grace and Aldred in the eradication of the Syndicate, while learning the fact that the desire for power can sometimes cause betrayals, much like what happened to Jake, just to change his name into the Captain, which isn't a name lol. That's all from me. Moga out.